Hi everyone, welcome to the Stitches and Scribbles channel. My name is Erin and today I've got a tutorial for you of how to make 3 different ornament or gift wrap designs using a simple granny square. Now for any of these you can use different granny square designs if you would like to, such as like a willow square or something more like a sunburst square or more ornate ones, but I chose to just go with plain classic granny squares for this just to show you how simple it can be. The first design we're going to be making is this little simple case tube design. This one is great for small gifts and it can be hung on the tree with a hook or with a ribbon, or you can include it as part of a stocking stuffer or gift wrap, something like that. I think that these are more versatile than you'd think that they would be. Our second design is a little granny square envelope with a button or a bead that opens up. These are also great as like a gift wrap extra. Mine is having trouble staying closed, but just like the other one, you could hang it on the tree if you wanted to. And our last one is a very cute Christmas tree ornament. This one is not really stuffable because you sew up all the edges in the process, but it does make a very cute little ornament or like a tag on a gift bag, and you can also decorate it with beads and buttons. So in order to be ready for this, you need granny squares where you have sewn in the center starting thread, but not the one that you ended. So make a granny square, leave a really long tail at the end, and just sew in the first one, and then you're ready to start these designs. All right, for these projects, you're going to need 1 granny square per ornament design. I'm going to be starting with this gray one. You're also going to need a darning needle for all of them, and then depending on the design you're going to need a few other things along the way. For this first one, we're just making a very simple kind of tube shape, I guess. This is a perfect one for gifting a makeup item, or even if you're gifting cash and want to roll it up and put it in here, or something like candy canes. You can even use them at the dinner table to hold your silverware for something festive. So we're going to end up folding this in half. I'm going to thread my needle with the leftover strand from the outside, and I'm just going to work through one edge of the granny square going back up the edge so that my yarn gets to a corner. Just like that. Because now it'll be in the right place to start sewing and we didn't have to trim it or start a new one. So now we can fold that granny square in half. And you're just going to sew along one long edge and the short edge to close it up. I like to kind of match up my stitches. So like this is the second stitch out of 3 in the corner and the second stitch out of 3 in the corner on the other side, and pull it through. Now we have the first corner stitch on each side. Now the first stitch in the granny cluster. Second stitch in the granny cluster, and so on. Pun not intended on that one. This will give you a nice clean edge to your project, and since those granny clusters are so easy to see, it's pretty easy to keep all of your stitches straight. This would also be a great ornament if you are gifting something like a dollhouse doll, or anything kind of like the long skinny shape. I'm trying to think of what other little common gifts could fit in here. Maybe like pens or markers for somebody would be really cute in one of these little guys. If you do any sort of a like hide a prize on your Christmas tree game, this would be great. Any sort of like stick candy. Maybe even a couple K-cups could fit in here if you're gifting coffee. Lots and lots of options for this one. The problem with sewing things up is it's really hard to keep it on camera as you're doing it. I don't know about you, but I end up moving around a lot when I'm sewing a piece together. It's very hard to keep it centered in frame. Okay, once you've reached the edge, you can go through one more time, create kind of a little loop for your yarn and stick your needle back through it to lock that final stitch in place, and then weave your ends in. I like to go kind of back through the sewn stitches because those tend to be a little bit tighter. And then you can trim your yarn for that one. That one is pretty easy, pretty fast. I think for all of these, the granny square took me about 10 to 15 minutes for each granny square, and sewing it up takes about 5, at least for this one. So that's your first finished ornament. And with any of these, you can either put a ribbon or a string to hang it, or you can use a little ornament hook like this one to hang it from your tree. And you could even use pliers to pinch that closed if you wanted to. So there's our first ornament. For our second ornament, you're going to need another granny square, and you're going to need a bead or a small button as well, because we're going to be making a teeny tiny envelope for this one. So to start off, you're going to thread your needle with that excess yarn. And for this one, we probably don't need to reposition it up to a corner because we're going to be folding all of the corners in. So since that yarn is kind of in the middle already, we can just pinch it and start sewing from the middle to both of those corners. Since this one's a little tiny envelope, this would be great for like a pair of earrings that are on one of those little cards, or a really tiny card, or again, if you're doing cash, you can kind of fold it up however you want. These could also be cute as part of a table setting. So there's one corner folded in. Now we're going to fold in another corner, thread the yarn through that corner, and then we're going to sew from corner to edge on this one. Just like that to the corner. And again, we're going to do one more loop through. Put your needle back through that loop to knot it, and weave your ends back in through that stitched up line. Just like that. And this time we're not going to cut the yarn because we're going to put on the bead. Now for the bead or the button, you want one with a large enough hole that your darning needle can pass through it, which is what I grabbed. So we're going to sew that little bead in place with just a couple of quick stitches. Like that. Then you can make one of those little loop knots again right next to it to kind of lock it in place. And pass your yarn back through the other stitched up side to weave that end into place. And then you can trim your yarn, kind of pop it back up or back out, pull on it a little bit, and the corner of that granny square makes a natural buttonhole for your little envelope. I think that one turned out really cute. This one too, you could use a ribbon at the top to hang it, or one of the little ornament hooks, and you could hang it by the top or from the corner. It doesn't really matter which one. You might want to use a slightly bigger bead than I did. Mine looks like it would have a little trouble staying closed, but it is still very cute. For our last ornament, we're going to be making a Christmas tree. So you need your granny square in green. You also need a small crocheted rectangle in brown. This one's just made with a couple rows of single crochet, kept it pretty small. I also have that long tail left on like I did with my previous squares, so I'm going to go ahead and thread my darning needle. And for this one, we also want to work up to a corner like we did with the first one. So I'm going to quickly just stitch up the side until I reach the corner and pull through. We're going to start by folding in our two corners on opposite sides together. And that's going to make kind of the big point part of our tree. And then just line up those edges. So it should kind of look like you folded it diagonally down the middle, but we're going to end up squishing it flat to make that triangle shape later. But you can hold it folded diagonally to make it a little easier to visualize as you are working. Or a little easier to hold, I guess, not to visualize. That was the wrong word there. This one is not going to be one that you can put something inside the ornament. This one is purely decorative. But you could, if you wanted to add a little bit of extra dimension before doing the final sewn shut seam at the end, you could put a triangle of scrap fabric sewn up in there, or a triangle of like scrapbook paper if you want like a little pop of color underneath. You could put wire inside this one to give it more structure. I guess you could with the other ones as well. You could also use lots of little scrap buttons and sew them to the tree if you have extra buttons or beads lying around your crafting space. I always love Christmas tree ornaments or art that have like vintage buttons on them. I think that would be really cute on this ornament as well. I grew up, my grandmother had a framed Christmas tree piece of art that was a Christmas tree made up entirely of vintage buttons. So that's kind of what I'm picturing in my head. I feel like a lot of people had that at one point in time. Okay, we have reached the corner. Okay, and now we're going to move to the middle of the next side with our yarn, so about there, so that it should look like that. Then you're going to fold up that bottom edge of the triangle, and we're going to sew in kind of a arrow-shaped line, I guess, or two straight lines. I don't know what to call that. We're going to sew up the remainder, and you want to make sure that the corner hits right in the middle of the seam that you already did. I remember first seeing, I think it was actually like a Christmas tree pillow that I saw online where someone had done it with a square piece of fabric like this and thought it was just the coolest thing. So I knew I had to recreate it in crochet form. Any of these little projects, but especially this one, would be super cute if you need to make like a bunch of the same item for people because they're so customizable. But this one especially, like if you need to make like a Christmas gift for all of your kids' teachers or for a set of coworkers, this is a really great one because you can really customize the color. Even if you're just using all shades of green and brown for these, you can still use enough different shades or embellishments to make each one unique for the recipient. You could even do some fun Christmas tree colors if you know someone's got a particularly funky Christmas decorating style. And just like the others, we're going to do one extra stitch at the end and loop it through to create a little knot, and then weave in your end through that sewn edge. Pull it through and trim your yarn. Now you could do just the triangle section of the Christmas tree like this. It still looks like a pine tree, but I think it does look better with a little stem on it. So we're going to do that. I'm going to thread my needle with that brown yarn, and I'm just going to work it into this cluster that's sitting right here. And this one, you can't be quite as precise as when sewing up the edges because the stitches aren't going to match up, but that is just fine. Do a couple quick whip stitches. I'm going to actually just tie my two ends in a knot to hold them in place. And then thread my darning needle with both of those ends. And weave them in kind of on the back of the project, probably through these two clusters here, right at the bottom. Make sure you pull them both pretty taut, and then you can trim that one as well. That's it for your little Christmas tree, but you can go nuts with little beads and embellishments. You could make a little star for the top, and just like the other ones, ooh, hit my camera, you could hang it with a ribbon at the top or a little wire hook just like that. And there's all three of your granny square Christmas ornament designs. And that's it for the tutorial. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that this is the last minute tutorial that you needed to finish up your holiday gifts. And let me know down below if you have a favorite or one that you think you're going to be using this holiday season. I have a feeling I'm going to be making much more of these trees, but I'm also really tempted to make a set of these to use as part of my table place setting for Christmas to put silverware in, or even like some little flowers at everybody's spot at the table. But I hope that you enjoyed all three and that it gave you some creativity and some last minute gift ideas. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked what you saw today, make sure that you hit the subscribe button down below so that you can be notified of all of my videos right here on YouTube. And if you would like to see me on other social media platforms, that information is in the description box down below. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye everyone.